Welcome to chapel this morning. It's an exciting day to be at Baylor. I'm glad that you are here. If you're coming in, come on, sit down. There's plenty of seats up here in the front. Hey, I want to make you aware of a couple things. One, we have this amazing reception that our president hosts each and every year. This is actually the second year that she has hosted it, and I'm really excited to share it with you. It's called the Faith Traditions Reception. If you come from a practice that is a practice of faith that is not Christianity. So we make no bones about the fact that here at Baylor, it's a Christian university. It's even a university that's a Baptist university. But maybe you come from a different faith tradition. We want you to know that even though this is a Christian university, and because it's a Christian university, we love and accept you and want you to be here. So we want you to come to the Faith Traditions Chapel. It's next Monday in Cashin Commons. Everybody know where Cashin is? Right over there across from the circle. If you'll go to the circle and then go that way, then go to Cashin Commons, 3:30 to 4:40 or 4:30, I don't know. Anyway, go there on Monday. I'll try to remind you about it Monday morning as well during chapel. Also want to share with you that just in this chapel in 905, we are still, I sent an email out last night to all of you. We just need a worship leader, the front person, the person who can just lead out in the worship. We've had some different people who've plugged in throughout the semester. But if that's something you would say, hey, I know somebody who would like to do that, or I want to do that, check the email that I sent to you last night. It was probably 9 or 10 o'clock. And so just go check that or send it to friends and have them apply to be a part of that. Hey, I'm excited that you're here. It's going to be a really great day in chapel. I'm excited that you're going to be here to experience it. Will you kind of tune in with me and just take some deep breaths as we begin our time of worship this morning?
Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. Still in your hands, this is my confidence, you've never failed me yet. I know the night won't last, your word will come to pass.
God, we need you in this place. When we don't think we need you, bring us back to that awareness, God, that we need you every hour. We need you in this moment. God, share with us and change us in this day. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, we pray. Amen. Amen. You may have a seat. Several years ago, I was a part of this committee that put together this initiative called Global Baylor. Global Baylor was basically a response to the fact that we needed to create more pathways for you to be educated for worldwide leadership and service. That's part of our mission here at the university. We recognize that you don't just need to be educated academically, but also cross-culturally, preparing you, our students, to adapt and succeed in a diverse and multicultural world. Global Baylor is designed to help you to develop globally essential skills and knowledge that will better prepare you for leadership and service in this global society that you all are a part of. You can apply to be a part of a certificate program that not only can go on your resume, but also goes on your degree itself. It's a certificate for global engagement. You can find out more about that by just simply going to the Baylor website and typing in Global Baylor in the search bar, or going to baylor.edu/Global Baylor. Our speaker today is part of that initiative to cast the net wide, to cast the seeds of Baylor students all over the world. She is not only a global influencer, she literally lives in both Argentina and California. She flew here from Argentina to be a part of our chapel today. Claire Diaz Ortiz is considered one of the most innovative female voices in digital media today. As an author and speaker and innovative advisor, she was named one of the 100 most creative people in business by Fast Company, a magazine I'm sure if you're in business, you know well. She was an early employee at Twitter, and she'll share more about that in just a little while. In her work, she's been called everything from the woman who got the Pope on Twitter. And if you remember at the very beginning of the semester, I told you that we would have someone here who got the Pope himself on Twitter. She's also been called a force for good by Forbes magazine and one of the most generous people in social media. Claire is an award-winning author of 8 books, published in more than a dozen countries. She's a frequent international speaker on innovation and digital media and has delivered keynotes and trainings at the Vatican, the UN, the US State Department, South by Southwest, Toyota, Verizon, TEDx, and more. She holds an MBA from Oxford. She has a BA and an MA from Stanford. She's one of the digital world's earliest social activists, and I'm excited for you to hear those stories from her today. She appears here in chapel after having appeared on CNN and BBC and Time and Newsweek and the New York Times and Good Morning America, and I run out of breath just trying to tell you all the great places she's been influential. I'm thrilled that she will be influential for us this morning. Will you welcome with me to the Baylor stage Claire Diaz Ortiz? That was my Benson thing.
Hi guys, thank you so much for having me here today. I give speeches a lot of places, but the place I most love giving speeches.
Quicker.
Hello. Thank you guys so much for having me here today. Oh, my clicker, I forgot. It's a total joy to be talking to students. There is no one I prefer talking to simply because I feel like as a student, you're at such an interesting inflection point in your life, thinking about all the things you want to do and all the things you could do and all the different paths you could go on. So I hope that in the next half an hour, some of the stories that I share will intersect with some of the ideas and potential stories in your heart to give you a little bit more of a spark to know what your next right thing might be. So today we're really going to be talking about finding your path to do the good you want to do, because I believe that everyone has a piece of them that wants to do a heck of a lot of good. And I believe that there are 3 kind of ways to think about finding your path. And I'm going to start with talking about the importance of following the signs. And I will do so by starting with a bit of my story. So this is a picture of me building a compost heap for a poor family in Nicaragua when I was 16 years old. Now, if you can't guess by the gel in my hair at the time, I was not equipped to build a compost heap for anyone. In fact, when I was in high school, I had realized that I had this passion for languages and other cultures. And so when a school nearby organized a service learning trip to Nicaragua for a month, I signed on. The idea of the trip is that we would go and we would teach English and we would help this poor community. Obviously, none of us were equipped to teach English or to build compost heaps or to do anything of the sort. But what we did do is we didn't do anything bad, and for the most part, we were able to connect with the community, and I was able to see on that trip that this was really something that I resonated with, this idea of doing service work, of connecting with others, of learning from others in another land. And so this was kind of one of the first big signs to me that this was the direction that maybe I could start taking my life in. I went on to college, and when I was in college, I studied overseas in a couple different countries. And one of the countries I studied overseas in was Italy. I went to Florence, Italy, which is just full of Americans every semester who go there to study overseas. It's a really fun place to study, and you honestly don't get a lot of the culture because there are so many freaking American students around you. So while I was there, I became pretty obsessed with this English language bookstore. And I would go there, I would frequent the store a lot, and one day I found a used book in the bottom of a shelf called On Mexican Time. And at the time, I was a junior in college. I'd been studying Italian for 3 years. I was really bad at it, and I knew my Spanish was better, so I kind of had these dreams of going back to Latin America. So when I saw this book On Mexican Time, I said, oh, gotta read this. The book was about a couple who were retiring in Texas, and instead of living out the rest of their retirement years in Texas, they moved to Mexico. And they built a house, and they dealt with, bad contractors and biting dogs and the fun of living in this town called San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. And I read this book, and I was, a 21-year-old. I was not retiring, I was not building a house, but I wanted to go to this town. So when I graduated from college, I got this really crappy but really amazing online editing job that allowed me to work from anywhere and pay my bills, so I decided to do it in Mexico. This is the house I rented for a year and a half in Mexico. That's me waving from the top porch. And the thing that was most impactful about my time in Mexico, where I honestly did a whole lot of nothing when I wasn't doing my editing job, was that I had a lot of time to think. And a lot of time to think about where my path was going and what I wanted to do next. And I realized that something I really wanted to do was to travel more. And so I started to do a few little trips here and there. My mom took me on a guided tour of China. It cost $900. It went on for 3 weeks, and it was one of the most exhausting things I've ever done in my life. If you've ever been on a guided tour, you know that they wake you up at 6 a.m. and then you go to see a million things all day, and then you get back to the hotel at midnight and you're exhausted. And so one day I opted out of the tour activities and just hung out at the hotel's internet cafe and got on AIM at the time. This was 2004, 2005. And started chatting with my best friend, who was at home having her own sort of quarter-life crisis, putting off medical school. She didn't know what she wanted to do. And I said, hey, Laura, what about we go travel around the world for a year? She had the same crappy editing job I did. And she responded immediately, yes. So we did. We spent 9 months traveling to 19 different countries, editing all along the way. And it was an incredible journey. We did some really impressive stuff. We ran a marathon in Madrid. We climbed to the base camp of Mount Everest. I'm like lying on her right here because I have bad altitude sickness. And then we did a lot of pretty dumb stuff. We spent, months on beaches in Southeast Asia drinking pina coladas. Ultimately, the end of the trip took us to the country of Kenya. And we went there with dreams of climbing Mount Kenya, one of the big mountains in East Africa. And someone we knew said, well, if you're going to go to Kenya and climb Mount Kenya, you've got to stay overnight at this guest house that's near the base of the mountain. And at the time, we did anything if it was free or nearly free. So we said, yeah, that sounds great. We'll stay at that guest house. And as we were pulling up to the guest house, we found out that the guest house was actually on the grounds of a church and on the grounds of an orphanage. So it was a compound. And this kind of concerned me. I'd never been in an orphanage before. I didn't know what that would be like. I was worried what it would mean to meet the kids and then to leave an hour later, and would that be weird? But we walked into this beautiful space, these beautiful grounds and gardens, and the elders from the church invited us to a lunch ahead of meeting some of the children. So we go into this lunch, and we're having some amazing Kenyan food, the chapati and the rice, and it's incredibly fresh vegetables. And in the middle of that lunch, I asked to go use the bathroom. There was a small, dusty bathroom in the back of the church rectory. And when I'm in that bathroom, I see this mirror hanging on the wall. It's kind of a scratched, dirty mirror in my mind. And as I look in that mirror, something happens to me that had never happened before and has never happened since. I hear the voice of God. And God is apparently saying to me, open your eyes so that you can see. Now, I'd never heard the voice of God before, and I wasn't even sure I believed in anything like that, so I was a little bit freaked out by the whole thing. But I left that bathroom with this idea in my head of, okay, I need to open my eyes so that I can see. I go back to the lunch, and by the end of the lunch, I'm convinced that I'm not going to climb the mountain, and I'm going to stay at this orphanage, and I'm going to think about maybe if I should be living there for a longer period of time. You know, I'm at this stage of my life where I'm looking for signs around me. I'm looking for the next right thing to do. So I tell my best friend, Lara, you go climb the mountain. I'm going to stay here at the orphanage guest house, and I'm going to fast and pray on the decision. And while I fast and pray on the decision, I'm going to read the entire Bible. I figure I'm a fast reader. I can scan the boring parts. The plan doesn't work. You know, by the time I get to Leviticus, I faint, and the poor orphanage elders have to take me to the health clinic. It's a disaster, right? Exactly what you don't want in your international volunteer. But I realized by that time, it's only been a day, that I had made my decision. I was going to stay at this orphanage. So Lara and I end up living at the orphanage for the better part of the next year. We start a nonprofit organization called Hope Runs. This is an image that was used in Runner's World magazine and later in a book I wrote about the experience. And the boy in the image is Sammy. Sammy ended up being, well, I'll tell you the end of that story later, but I'll tell you when I met Sammy that very first day at the orphanage, he was this scrawny little 11-year-old kid, and he said to me, Barack Obama will be your president. This was 2006, so I thought he was a genius boy. And that sort of started off our relationship. We became quite close, and I'll tell you the end of that story at the end of this talk. But for me, this story was all about following the signs. And there was one more way I was following the signs in this, and that was because at the time, I think we missed a slide, I had this crappy telephone that I used, an old Nokia telephone, and this was the telephone that allowed me to share my work with the world. At the time, in 2006 in Nairobi, Kenya, if you wanted to get online and start blogging, you would connect your Bluetooth dongle to the old crappy laptop you had, and it would connect with the old crappy phone, and then you would get online. It might take a minute or two with a slow dial-up connection, but then you could blog. And so I had started this blog about my time in Africa that had become popular, and the people who started blogger.com, which is where a lot of us were blogging back in 2006, were also the people that started Twitter. So when they started Twitter, they said, hey, why don't you get on board and start tweeting about your experiences just like you've been blogging? And so I did. There weren't a lot of people tweeting at the time from out in Kenya, and I essentially became an early user of the platform talking about my work in nonprofits. And so these are all just ways that I kind of followed small signs to get to this point and ultimately to become an early employee at Twitter working on issues of social good? All because of following some of those small signs. So I want to talk about something else now, because sometimes when you follow the signs, sometimes things turn out really well, and sometimes they don't. But you always have to try and keep trying. This is an image of the original sketch, the original vision that co-founder Jack Dorsey, the co-founder of Twitter, had for the platform. He called it Status at the time, STAT.US, and in his vision, it was going to be a place where you could click some tick boxes to say what you were doing. You were going to the park, you were in bed, you were walking a dog. It was a really simple platform in his mind. And he had no idea what would really come of this simple platform. It turned out that what would become of it was completely dependent on the other users who started to use it. So this is James Buck. James Buck in 2008 was a photojournalist and blogger at the University of California at Berkeley, my hometown, and he was studying for his master's thesis, labor protests in Egypt. And so he got on a plane to go do some research to complete his master's thesis. And right before doing so, some of his friends out in California said, hey, James, if you're going to be traveling and working on this thesis work, it would be really useful for you to join this new thing we've been using called Twitter. A lot of journalists are on it. It's a great way to connect. It might help you with your research. You might even be able to find someone in Egypt who's on too, and you guys could meet up. So he did. He lands in Egypt. He's recently joined Twitter. He's got less than 100 followers. And he goes to a labor protest in the city of Mahala, south of Cairo. And when he's at the protest, a really bad thing happens. He gets arrested for taking some video at this protest. And so when he's sitting in the back of the police car, he does the first thing that comes to his mind, which is sending out a tweet. He sends out a one-word tweet, and that tweet reads, arrested. By the end of that day, his network on Twitter was able to mobilize and able to get in touch with the US ambassador, and the next tweet he sends, which I don't have here, is another one-word tweet, and it just reads, freed. And so this is a really powerful story today, but it was an even more powerful story back in 2008, when again, people thought that Twitter was just something you would use to talk about what you were eating for breakfast. And there were a lot of more incredible, powerful stories to come. This is a picture from what was deemed the first Twitter revolution. This is in the summer of 2009 on the island of Moldova. A bunch of citizens were protesting the communist government, and they were able to organize their protests around Twitter when the government cut off their SMS. So they organized their protest using Twitter, and this was dubbed the first Twitter revolution. We would see many of these to come. This is an image from when the US Airways plane crashed into the Hudson River. Everyone survived. What's important about this image is that it was not taken by a fancy journalist. It was taken by an individual on one of the ferries that was diverted to pick up the passengers who crashed in the river. And this was the image that then appeared on all the news shows and in all the newspapers. And so why this was a big deal is it was the first time that we saw that individuals could really be citizen journalists, and individuals could break news on social media platforms. This is an image from the Haiti earthquake in 2010. This is another first for social media platforms. This was the first time that we saw that social media could be useful in natural disasters, not just to connect people with the resources they needed, but also to help mobilize in fundraising. So these were all really, really powerful, wonderful, positive examples of the way that Twitter and more largely social media was being used in the world. I was at Twitter, I was working there, my job was to help these causes and powerful do-gooders do more good on the platform. I wrote a book called Twitter for Good, Change the World One Tweet at a Time. Nobody batted an eye. We all agreed social media is a good place for doing good. And then 2018 hit. I like to say that 2018 was the worst year of social media's life. This is one of the many hundreds of headlines you could have seen that year. This one from CNN saying Silicon Valley's gut-wrenching year confronting its dark side. 2018 was the year that we really understood that social media, this tool, this thing, this platform, this monster we had created was doing bad things to our brain, bad things to our kids, bad things to our mental health, and bad things to our democracy. We had created something good, things had been going well, but now things were going really south. I like this image because I think it reflects what so many of us feel during our days. We feel chained to our smartphones. On average, most of us Americans spend 3.5 hours a day on your smartphones. I bet many of you in the audience actually spend more than that. I often spend more than that if I'm not being aware of it. They say that teenagers these days send 10,000 texts a month, and that the average person spends more than 60 minutes on Facebook a day. Now, there are some really dire consequences to this. One of those consequences is concentration. ADD rates are through the roof. We are unable to concentrate on anything. Many of us don't even read anymore simply because our concentration can't even get to the end of one freaking page. I have 3 little kids, 5 and under. The thing that I'm perhaps most concerned about these days is what social media, what these digital devices are doing to our little kids who, were not used to seeing these many screens in past generations. And we have no idea what the effects of this might be. One of my friends was the designer of the iPad, and I was meeting with him for coffee a few months ago, and he has 4 boys, all 5 and under, and none of them have ever seen an iPad. And he's the guy who designed the iPad, invented the iPad. And he says, I won't even let them touch it till they're 8. There's all kinds of effects that are happening to our brain, and we don't even know them yet. And for kids, it could be anything. Perhaps one of the most concerning is adolescent girls. So they say that suicide rates in adolescent girls have increased dramatically in the last half generation. And many posit that this has to do with social media. If you think about it, many of us have had the experience of going on Instagram, seeing a party that you wish you could go to, but you know you should study. You have that fear of missing out. Maybe you go on Instagram and you see a bunch of people partying at something you weren't invited to, or in some incredible beach in an exotic location, and you start to feel that comparing and despairing feeling. So imagine how we feel about all of that, and our brains are a lot more developed than the 13-year-old girl. And finally, you hear a lot about fake news, and I'm not going to get political, so we're not going to talk about fake news, but it doesn't matter if you're from the right or the left. The reality of what is happening on social media has to do with something we call an information silo. Confirmation bias is another word for it. Here's what happens. I get on social media, I get on Facebook, I send out information in the form of the types of things I post. I receive back other posts from people that usually have similar opinions to me statistically, and then what I start to see more of is sponsored data from all the data that the social media networks are downloading about me that reflect my own biases, right? This is confirmation bias, and I live in an information silo, and we all do. So, these are massive problems, and no one had any idea when we created social media that this kind of stuff was out there. We're starting to see a lot of apologies, though. This is Mark Zuckerberg. He has, testified before Congress a number of times in the last 2 years, apologizing for the ways his work was used to divide people rather than bring them together. Evan Williams, one of the co-founders of Twitter, has also apologized. His apologies have centered on an interesting factor, which is him saying, had we had more women and minorities as original employees at Twitter and engineers, we might have created a platform that was less abusive and bullying towards women and minorities, because Twitter has notoriously been very bad about protecting people. So we're seeing apologies. We're seeing people saying, oh, we took this path, it wasn't the right path, we are sorry about it, and we're finally also seeing some people changing direction on that path, right? Because of course, what we all want to feel also as people of faith is that there is a path of redemption. This is Tristan Harris. He was one of the original engineers at Google, and last year he came together with a guy named Justin Rosenstein, who's the guy that created the like button on Facebook. If you're familiar with the like button, which you all are, it's basically the most addictive thing that was ever created on social media, because it allows social media to basically do the same thing to your brain that gambling does, right? So you put in an input, which is in your case, you're opening up social media and you scroll one more time, and occasionally you see something really exciting that lights your brain up. A lot of times you don't, but very occasionally and very randomly you do. And so that makes you keep coming back for more and keep coming back for more. And then what the like button does is it connects your addictive sense of wanting to come back for more with your sense of self-worth. Is someone liking what you posted or not? What is their reaction to it? So these guys came together with some other folks and they created something called the Center for Humane Technology, which is trying to create a movement which they call time well spent, which is a movement for being better about how we spend our time in our digital lives. So this all shows that sometimes you do something, you think it is the right thing, and it isn't. And so then it's about changing course. And the reality is you can change course. And even those who have created some of what I would say is some of the most destructive platforms out there are able to change course these days and able to find ways for us all to live better in a digital world despite having created it. So there's a final thing that I think is critically important when it comes to finding your path, and it's all about looking to your left or looking to that thing that's right underneath your nose, because sometimes that's the thing we most easily miss. This is Pope Benedict. This is an image from 2012. This was when Pope Benedict sent his first tweet. That's a journalist from Mexico, and that's me in the ponytail. My mother said, "Why'd you wear a ponytail when you met the Pope?" And this is the picture from the day that we got the Pope on Twitter. Now, the story of this goes back to some people looking at what was right underneath their nose. There were some data scientists at Twitter who were doing some regular routine analysis of what was working, what tweets were really working well on the platform, what was getting a lot of engagement, what was getting a lot of reach, what kind of accounts were getting a lot of followers. And they found something that they thought was an anomaly at the time, which was that Bible verses had incredible engagement and incredible reach. They would see a pastor with 500 followers, and that pastor would be getting way more engagement than some celebrity with 10,000, even when you discounted the spam bots that might be following the celebrity. And they said, what is this? And so they kept digging into it, and it turned out that religious content at the time was the most engaged content on the platform. So at the time at Twitter as a company, our theory of growth was all about going into markets, into demographics like sports or movies or, comedy, or regions like Argentina or South Africa, and finding influencers in those areas, getting those influencers on the platform, getting them using it well, and then seeing how they would help their friends and followers also get on the platform. So we said, well, if religious tweets are getting more engagement than anything else, then this is something that's right underneath our nose. We have to go after religious content the same way we've gone after, celebrities, actors and actresses. And so we did, and I began a process of working essentially with religious influencers to get them on the platform. Obviously, the biggest religious influencer anyone could think of was Pope Benedict, and so after about a year of working with the Vatican, he did get on Twitter and soon became the most followed account on the platform across all his different languages. Now, there was something else happening at this time, though, that made me start thinking about what was really right to my left and right under my own nose. At the time, I was doing a lot of work. I was living in California. My husband was living in Argentina. I was working hard with the Vatican. I was publishing book after book. And so when I got pregnant with my first daughter and then went into labor, like the good employee I was, I didn't get off the clock. I went into labor a few weeks early. In the middle of the night, I woke up. I started Googling, did my water break? And then I took that Google to Twitter and tweeted out, just Googling, did my water break? And started off this viral live tweet storm of live tweeting my daughter's birth. I guess I was the first and only person to ever do this because it was such a bad idea. This is the homepage of yahoo.com. That's me and my first child. This is next day, just some of the places the ridiculous story appeared. The Conan O'Brien talk show, the Daily Mail. Friends texted me saying they saw I had a kid on Good Morning America. I couldn't even disconnect enough to have my first kid. So This was a fun experience for me, but it also indicated something greater that was shifting in my own life, which was this idea of, Claire, look what is right to your own left. Look what is right under your own nose. This was my first daughter. I started to slow down a bit with her, but then it was when I had 2 twin boys that were born really early that it sunk even harder. I wrote a letter online that went viral called A Letter to the Worst Year of My Life, talking about this 2-year period of having these kids and realizing that so much of my self-worth had been connected with my work, when in reality, the best thing that I could do was be present as a mom at the time. A final story about the importance of family and the importance of looking right to your left. This is Sammy. Sammy was the boy you saw in those early pictures, the 11-year-old who told me that Barack Obama was going to be president one day. When I left the orphanage in Kenya, Sammy came with me. He did high school in the US. He then went to South America, worked for a nonprofit. Now he's back in Kenya, working for another nonprofit that helps get women out of violent situations who've gone through female genital mutilation. He's finishing his university degree. And 2 months ago, we went to a number of African countries with Compassion International, a large nonprofit that raises children out of poverty in Jesus' name. And when we were in the country of Togo, Sammy decided that he wanted to sponsor these 2 twin girls. So I think I share this final part to the story because I think it shows that we all follow different signs in our lives, and we all find different ways to be on the path we are. We can all make changes. We can all redirect course, but it's always about doing what my friend Emily says is the next right thing. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Claire. As we prepare to dismiss, I ask all who can to please stand. This morning we will sing, May we hold the peace, share the peace, and be the peace of God. And we sing together.